Hello, dear students. In this lecture, we are going to discuss together the remaining two types of the cartilage. If you remember from the previous lecture, we discussed the first type of the cartilage tissue, which is the hyaline cartilage. Now we are going to discuss together the other two types of the cartilage tissue, which are the yellow elastic cartilage and white fibro cartilage. We will also start our explanation of the bone tissue at the end of this lecture. So now, by the end of this lecture, we will be able to describe the size, character, and the microscopic structure of both the elastic cartilage and the white fibro cartilage. You will also be able to identify the clinical problems caused by the defective structure in cartilage, and also describe the structure and the correlated function of the bone intercellular substances, which are the bone matrix, and also the connective tissue coverings of the bone tissue. So now, the second type of the yellow elastic of the cartilage tissue is called the yellow elastic cartilage, and from its name, actually, it is called yellow as its color in the fresh state is yellowish in color. So that's why it's called yellow elastic cartilage. And from its name also, it is called elastic cartilage because this actually the microscopic structure of this cartilage resembles the hyaline cartilage with the addition of elastic fibers inside the matrix, as we are going to see now in the next few slides. So this type of cartilage contains abundance of elastic fibers so that it enables it to be adapted to it allows the tissue or organ which contains the elastic cartilage to be flexible. Whenever you move this body part or organ, it returns to its position and resists its stretch or pressure. So when we can find this type of the this cartilage, the yellow elastic cartilage, we can see it in actually the ear pinna. Okay, if you start moving your start pushing your ear pinna with your fingers, it actually returns to its original state because of the presence of the elastic fibers inside the yellow elastic cartilage within the ear pinna. So it is its sites are the ear pinna and the external auditory meatus, which is opening for the external ear. And by going deep, we will find it also in the Eustachian tube, which connects the middle ear with the oropharynx. And also, if you remember from the hyaline cartilage, we mentioned one of the sites of the hyaline cartilage was the larynx and its cartilages. So except for the tip of arytenoid cartilage, because the tip of the arytenoid cartilage is formed of the yellow elastic cartilage, not hyaline cartilage. So now let's talk about the structure of the yellow elastic cartilage. As we mentioned before, it is actually similar to the hyaline cartilage, with only the only difference between both is the addition of elastic fibers, as you can see here, the reddish elastic fibers inside the matrix of the cartilage itself. So if we can recap the structure of the yellow elastic cartilage, we will find it covered by the perichondrium, which forms the main coverings of the different types of cartilage tissue, as we mentioned before. And we also mentioned that this perichondrium layer is not present in the white fibro cartilage, which we are going to discuss later on now. And also in one site only of the hyaline cartilage, which was the articular cartilage, because these sites are subject to frequent friction, which can result in disruption and tear of the perichondrium if it was present. So only these two sites mentioned, which are the articular cartilage and the white fibro cartilage, are devoid or lacking the outer perichondrium covering. So the perichondrium is, as you remember, is formed by two layers: the outer fibrous layer, which is formed of reddish collagen fibers and fibroblast and additional blood capillaries to supply nutrients and oxygen to the underlying avascular tissues of the cartilage. And also the inner layer of the perichondrium is called the inner chondrogenic layer, which we discussed previously. It is called the chondrogenic layer because it contains the cells responsible for chondrogenesis and formation of new cartilage tissue, or healing or growth of the cartilage. Actually, it is responsible for appositional growth of the cartilage, as we discussed before. Appositional growth of the cartilage by addition of new cartilage layer above the hyaline cartilage matrix. So the chondrogenic cells in the inner chondrogenic layer are the chondrogenic cells, chondroplast, and these cells only these two cells form the inner chondrogenic layer of the perichondria. So now let's move down deep into the cartilage matrix itself, and we will find it similar to the hyaline cartilage, where the chondrocytes are entrapped inside its lacunae and separated by cartilage matrix between these lacunae. And we will find here in this type of cartilage, the yellow elastic cartilage, that is formed that it contains additionally elastic fibers in addition to the regular hyaline cartilage matrix. That's why it's called yellow elastic cartilage. If we can remember which type of collagen fibers that are present in this structure, if you can remember that the outer perichondrium contains collagen type 1, which forms the most part of the connective tissue coverings, collagen type 1. But in the cartilage matrix itself, as in hyaline cartilage, the type of collagen present here is type 2 collagen. The type 2 collagen forms the matrix of all the cartilage, of all different types of cartilage matrix. Okay, but in the yellow elastic fibers, we can find additional to the collagen type 2, which forms a regular substance of the cartilage matrix. We can also find elastic fibers in between the cartilage cells. Okay, so that's the structure of the yellow elastic cartilage. Now let's move on to the white fiber, the third type of the cartilage tissue, which is the white fiber cartilage, and also it's called white because in the fresh state it appears white in color. So and the fibrocartilage, because as we are going to find later on in the next slide, that the structure of this type of cartilage contains abundance of collagen fibers, as we will see later on in the next slide. So where are the sites of the white fibrocartilage? Actually, it is present in the areas of severe or bearing severe stress, like in the intervertebral discs, in between in the vertebral discs, the whitish or grayish white structure present in between the vertebrae, and also in the symphysis pubis, forming the joint between the two bones. Okay, so the structure of the white fibrocartilage, it is formed of, as you can see here, islands of cartilage cells, chondrocytes inside lacunae, surrounded by the cartilage matrix, and these islands are separated by a regular connective tissue, which is formed of collagen fibers type 1, fibroblast, and blood capillaries also present in the fibrous tissue. So this structure is characteristic of the white fibrocartilage. As you can see here, that these are a row of chondrocytes inside lacunae, surrounded by the bluish hyaline bluish cartilage matrix, and these islands are separated from each other by regular connective tissue formed of collagen fibers type 1, fibroblasts, and blood capillaries. So if we can see here in this structure that the collagen type 1 here is also present in the fibrous tissue of the cartilage, and the collagen type 2 is present in the matrix of the cartilage part of this structure. And we can also see from this structure that there are no outer covering or the perichondrium covering of the cartilage. It is not present in this type of cartilage, as we mentioned before. Okay. The growth of the cartilage, we mentioned before that there are two pathways from we mentioned from the previous lecture. There are two pathways for the growth of the cartilage. The first one is the apposition growth, which is formed by the addition. We will find the in this diagram, which is better. Okay, so in this diagram we will we have mentioned before that the apposition growth of the cartilage is formed by the division and differentiation of the chondrogenic cells present in the perichondrium to start synthesis and secretion of the hyaline of the cartilage matrix. And when it is entrapped inside the matrix, like these cells, which are the first generation of the chondrocytes, it becomes called now chondrocytes, not chondrogenic cells. Okay, so the growth of this cartilage by this method is by the addition of new layer of cartilage matrix and cells. That's why it's called apposition growth. The other type of the growth of the cartilage is termed interstitial growth, which occurs by the division of the chondrocytes inside the lacunae, forming two cells inside one lacunae, where each of these cells start to grow and become separated inside its own lacunae from the other cell. So that's a type of growth from within the matrix of the cartilage, and that's why it's called interstitial growth of the cartilage. Okay, so that is the appositional growth from the chondrogenic cells in the perichondrium, while the interstitial growth occurs from the division of chondrocytes inside the lacunae. And we can see here in this chondrocyte inside lacunae, now it divides into two cells inside one lacuna, and now becomes separated, each cell with its own lacuna. So the nutrition of the cartilage, from where does the cartilage matrix and cells receive its nutrients for growth? Now, as we mentioned before, that matrix of the cartilage is avascular. It is completely avascular. So how does the nutrients reach the entrapped chondrocytes? Okay, so we mentioned before in the previous lecture that one of the main functions of the perichondrium, as it is rich in the presence of the blood capillaries in the outer fibrous layer, that's why it is responsible for the nutrition of the cartilage. So in all types of the cartilage which have the perichondrium, the nutrition of the cartilage occurs by diffusion of nutrients and the gases from the blood capillaries in the outer perichondrium. But we also mentioned before that there are two types of cartilage, which are the articular cartilage, one of the sites of the hyaline cartilage, and the white fibrocartilage are devoid or lacking the outer perichondrium. So these two types of cartilage receives its nutrition from other sources now. So in the articular cartilage, as it is present in the joints, it receives its nutrition actually from the synovial fluid of the joint itself, and the white fibrocartilage receives its nutrition from the blood capillaries, which are present in the fibrous part of the cartilage. Okay. Now, as a medical application of it, the osteoarthritis, one of the most common diseases actually occurring, especially in old ages and in obese persons. It is where there is a significant inflammation and affection of the joints, especially the joints bearing the weight of the body, like the knee joint, where there is the patient suffer from severe pain of the knee joints or the joints affected, especially in walking or when carrying heavy objects. In this disease, it's characterized by destruction of the cartilage tissue, which is the articular cartilage covering both ends of the bone. The cartilage, which is responsible for a smooth friction between these two adjacent bones, is now destroyed, and now both bones are subject to direct damage and friction, causing severe pain of the affected cartilage. So that's why in the osteoarthritis there is a severe pain due to destruction or the tear of the articular cartilage covering both bone ends. Sorry. So that's a hyaline cartilage perichondrium here covering the cartilage matrix, the bluish homogeneous matrix containing the chondrocytes inside its lacunae. And now the elastic fibers, it appears as a band, as you can see from here, covered from both sides by the perichondrium, as this section was taken excuse me, from the ear pinna. So that's why the cartilage appears as a strip or a band, and the matrix like the hyaline cartilage, but more reddish because it contains more elastic fibers. And now here in the last part, the white fibrocartilage, we can see islands of the chondrocytes separated by parts of the fibrous tissue in between these chondrocytes. So let's answer some questions now. The hyaline cartilage is present in, you can pause the video for a moment to think about the which correct answer, and you can resume whenever you are ready. So the correct answer is the costal cartilage, as you can revise the sites of the hyaline cartilage, and you can also deduce that the ear pinna and the epiglottis, we didn't mention before the epiglottis, but the epiglottis, like the ear pinna and the eustachian tube and the external auditory meatus, contains yellow elastic cartilage, while the intervertebral discs contain the white fibrocartilage. So next one, you can pause also the video for a moment. The oxygen and the nutrients from the perichondrial blood vessels reach the chondrocytes via, we have mentioned this before, via diffusion, okay, actually to chondrocytes inside its lacunae, entrapped inside the cartilage matrix. The type of collagen present in the matrix of hyaline cartilage, now it is the type 2 collagen. We mentioned before that type 2 collagen is present inside the matrix of all types of cartilage, okay? And in the perichondrium, the type of collagen is type 1 collagen, okay? The type of collagen, okay, I didn't know that this question, okay, we come next. The type of collagen present in the perichondrium is type 1 collagen. The epiphyseal plate, one is a type of the hyaline cartilage. Okay. Which of the following is true concerning the white fibrocartilage? So now the correct answer, it is A. It is not covered by the perichondrium. If you can remember here in this question, the other type of the cartilage which lacks the perichondrium is the articular cartilage, which is one of the sites of the hyaline cartilage. Which of the following is true concerning elastic cartilage? It is more flexible. That is the most significant character or difference between elastic cartilage and the hyaline cartilage. Which of the following is true concerning hyaline cartilage? It is surrounded by a perichondrium. The hyaluronic acid in the matrix of the cartilage actually is one of the glycosaminoglycans, but it is not sulfated. If you remember from the previous lecture, that we mentioned, the most common sulfated glycosaminoglycans was the chondroitin sulfate, but there is another type of the glycosaminoglycans which is not sulfated, is called the hyaluronic acid. It also absorbs water and is responsible for aggregation of more water inside the cartilage tissue. So now let's discuss together the bone matrix, the matrix of the bone, or the intercellular substance constituting the bone tissue. Now we can divide the bone matrix into two major categories, either organic or inorganic. The organic part, 90% of the organic part is formed of collagen, but now in the bone tissue here it's collagen type 1. If you remember, in the cartilage tissue is formed, the matrix of the cartilage tissue contains mainly collagen type 2, but the matrix of collagen of the bone tissue is formed mainly of collagen type 1, as it is more resistant to pressure and stress. Okay, and the remaining components, 10% actually, the amorphous substance, which are the glycosaminoglycans or GAGs, and proteoglycans, and also glycoproteins, as we mentioned before, in the matrix of the cartilage. But here its amount is significantly lower than the cartilage matrix, because we need the bone tissue to be very hard and not absorb water, so it becomes weak. So we need the bone matrix to become hard, so the amorphous substances are actually very low in its presence. And additional, some water are also present, but also in a very significantly lower value than the cartilage, to enable the hard substance of the bone. And now the inorganic structure of the bone matrix, actually it's completely the hydroxyapatite crystals, or the calcium crystals, forming the major part of the inorganic substance to allow calcification and the hardening of the matrix of the bone matrix, or hardening of the bone tissue. When we see a microscopic structure, microscopic section of the bone tissue, we will find that the bone matrix is added in the form of different lamellae, or different layers above each other. So these layers are called bone lamellae. Okay, so the addition of bone tissue or bone matrix is in the form of different layers, which are termed bone lamellae. So the cells secreting the bone matrix, it starts from cells called osteoblast, which we will discuss later on. The osteoblasts lying in the inner osteogenic layer of the covering of the bone. We will also go into discuss it together now in the pericardium, next slide. So in the periosteum, in the next slide. So in the periosteum, there are some types of cells, mainly the osteoblast. Osteoblast starts secretion of the bone tissue, as we mentioned, in the form of different layers or bone lamellae. And whenever they are become entrapped in between these lamellae, they are now termed osteocytes. So the osteoblast and osteocytes are responsible for formation and maintenance, respectively, of the bone tissue or bone lamellae. And you can see, if you can zoom in here, that these cells, osteocytes, lie inside lacunae, just as the chondrocytes inside lacunae in the cartilage. Here the osteocytes lie inside lacunae, inside its room in between the bone lamellae. And we can notice here minute canals, very microscopic or minute canals connecting between different bone lamellae and different lacunae, where the processes of these osteocytes run inside these minute canals to connect the different osteocytes in in the hardening in the hard substance of the bone matrix. Okay, so you can notice here that the osteocytes lie inside lacunae, and there are canaliculi arising from this lacunae to connect different lacunae together in different bone lamellae, where the processes of the osteocytes continue inside these canaliculi to connect to osteocytes or to adjacent osteocytes, and we could and so on. So there is an important question here that in patients suffering from scurvy, which is vitamin C deficiency, suffer from deformity in the structure of the bone. So the scurvy is one of the diseases which was common actually in the earlier in the very in the centuries 1800 in the century of 1800 and 1900s, early 1900s, where the sailors in the sea suffered from deficiency in the vitamin C, resulting in in different symptoms and signs. One of them is a bone deformity. Why? Because bone is the hardening of the bone is mainly formed by calcification of the matrix, and one of the major constituents of this matrix of the bone is the collagen type 1. And collagen type 1, if you remember, for its formation from the cells, it needs vitamin C, as it is important for the healthy structure of the collagen type 1 molecules. That's why in these sailors who were suffering from vitamin C deficiency had their collagen molecules not correctly formed inside the cells, and that's why the bone was deformed in these patients. So the connective tissue coverings of the bone, if we can go back to this structure, so this is the to explain it more, this is a long bone like a humerus or a femur, okay, and we took a section, a transverse section actually of the bone, and whenever we see that or look from this from above at the section, okay, we will find the structure of the bone as in this diagram. Okay, so if you can look at a transverse section of the bone, we can see that there is an outer covering of the bone is called periosteum, and an inner lining of the bone, which is called endosteum. And the periosteum here, as you can remember, it is similar to the perichondrium, which is formed of the outer fibrous layer also, which is rich in collagen fibers, fibroblast, and blood capillaries, and an inner not chondrogenic as in cartilage. It is termed here inner osteogenic layer from the synthesis of bone tissue. So the inner layer is called inner osteogenic layer of the periosteum. Okay, and the lining of the bone, the internal lining of the bone, actually is called by covered by a new tissue which is called endosteum. So the covering of the outer part of the bone is called the periosteum, formed of two layers: outer fibrous layer and inner osteogenic layer, while the inner lining of the bone is made by a single layer, which is called or termed endosteum. Okay, so the endosteum lines the medullary cavities, facing the bone marrow inside the bone cavity, and also it lines additionally two main canals. One of these canals is called Volkmann's canal. The Volkmann's canal is a longitudinal canal running longitudinally inside the axis of the bone. This is called Volkmann's canal. Sorry, I'm mistaken. This is called a version canal. So the longitudinal canal here, which is present inside the bone tissue, is called Haversian canal, while the transverse canal which is present here is called the Volkmann's canal. So the lining of these canals, the Haversian canal, the longitudinal canal, which is termed Haversian canal, and the Volkmann's or the transverse canal is also lined by endosteal layer. So the function of these canals are to, as you can see from this diagram, it actually carries the blood capillaries from outside of the bone into the inside to the bone marrow. So it transmits the blood capillaries from the outside to the inside, and also it runs up and down and in the transverse manner to supply or for nourishment of the nourishment of the nearby osteocytes. Okay, the osteocytes nearby which are entrapped inside their lacunae. Okay. So the periosteum, as we mentioned, is formed of the outer fibrous layer and inner osteogenic layer. The outer fibrous layer, as we mentioned, also is formed of the collagen fibers, type 1, fibroblast, and blood capillaries, while the inner osteogenic layer contains the cells responsible for osteogenesis, which are osteogenic cells, osteoblasts. Okay, these are the cells forming the inner osteogenic layer. So, what is the function of the periosteum? As we mentioned here, it contains the blood capillaries and the osteogenic cells, so it helps in nourishment of the underlying bone tissue, and and also the formation of new bone, which is osteogenesis, or healing and repair and the growth of the bone tissue. That is the importance of the periosteum tissue. Okay, at some points where the muscle becomes attached to the periosteum, okay, arise fibers which are called fibers of Charpy. These fibers helps or arise in the periosteum, which connects the muscle as the tendon insertion or the muscle attached to the inside or the first or part of the underlying bone tissue to help fix the muscle tissue to the bone structure itself. The inner lining of the endosteum, which lines the internal cavities of the bone, as we mentioned, which are the medullary cavities, the cavities facing the bone marrow inside the bone, and also Volkmann's and Haversian canals, which are lined, these cavities are lined by the endosteum layer. And actually the endosteum layer is similar to the inner osteogenic layer of the periosteum. So this layer contains the same osteogenic cells, which are osteogenic cells, osteoblasts. So it is responsible for formation and healing, formation of new bone and healing of the bone, and also it contains additionally a characteristic cell which is present only in the endosteum layer, which is called osteoclast. So these osteoclasts, as we will discuss later in next lecture, are responsible for clearing and decalcifying bone tissue and digestion of bone tissue. So endosteum, the layer of the endosteum contains the cells that can actually break down bone tissue, and other two cells that can synthesize new bone tissue. So these cells, as we will mention before, can digest old or worn out bone tissue substance, and its osteogenic cells can synthesize new bone matrix and bone tissue. So the collection of these three types of cells are responsible for something called bone remodeling, which is characterized by bone resorption of the old or worn out bone tissue and addition of new bone tissue. That's something or a dynamic process which is called bone remodeling, and it is characteristic to an endosteum layer only, as it contains the osteogenic cells and osteoblasts and osteoclasts. Okay, So that's the end of the lecture for